Hey folks, Simon here from Velo Performance. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you're a regular visitor, hey, look, good to have you back. Last time on the channel, I posted a video about me jumping back on a plane, heading back out to Mallorca and thumping around the island as fast as I could. This is kind of like a reflective video, behind the scenes video, where I'm going to talk about some of the things that went well and some of the things that didn't go so well, which I know is definitely going to help you. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how to carb load and not do it in a way that makes you feel bloated. Pacing insights and how you shouldn't really stress too much if it drops, but also how to get it back. I'm also going to talk about how I dealt with heat stroke, and also there was a moment in the ride where I couldn't eat my normal race fuel, which was totally unusual for me. Normally I'm fine with everything that I eat and drink, but I had at least a 2.5 hour window where nothing wanted to go down, and I'll talk you what I did to get over that. And if you stick right to the end, I'll give you a little tip that I used to stop me from getting a cold when I was traveling, which I'd completely forgotten about until one of my mate's wives, who's one of these super nurses, reminded me of just before I left. Righty, let's get into it. Now, for the most part, when you really delve into it, if you look on the internet, people will say you can carb load a day beforehand, and this is why I don't think you should. To carb load correctly the day beforehand, you need anywhere between 7 and 12 grams of carbohydrate per kg of body weight. If you work that off someone at my weight at 66 kg and put in the full 12 grams, that's close to 800 grams of carbohydrate spread evenly across the day, which that's a lot of food, so digestively you're gonna struggle. A few things I do here differently from the norm. Now, when I'm working with the cyclists and athletes that I coach, I do say to them, in the 4 or 5 days run up to your cycling event, when you're trying to carb load, this isn't necessarily the most healthful practice, and we're not looking at your total overall health. We're making sure that you are properly carbohydrate loaded going into your event. We also need to be pretty mindful that we're not eating a lot of fruit and veg, because that's got a fair bit of fiber and you don't want to have a lot of stool bulk. Yeah, I'll say it again, it's not super healthy to do it this way, but it's only for 4 days as you go into your race. So what we're trying to do is minimize your fat and drop protein down and minimize that, so we've got a bigger window for carbohydrate. So about 4 days out, what I try and get my cyclists and athletes to think about is upping their carbohydrate, dropping fat and protein, and aiming for roughly about 7 grams of carbohydrate per kg of body weight spread evenly across the day. And by doing it that way, it's much easier to eat that volume of carbohydrate. It's not so drastic for the digestive system to deal with, and therefore you don't get a lot of gastric bloating, which if you do it the other way, where you eat massive amount of carbohydrate the day before with lots of different foods that you wouldn't normally eat, then you're gonna have problems on race morning. Types of things I eat before a race is things like rice pudding or plain rice, because it's high in carbohydrate, low in fat, and not too high in fiber. As much as I love my oats, I generally don't eat these because they're high in fiber and they're high in calories because of the fat content in them. One of the things I say to the cyclists and athletes I coach is aim for foods which are high in carbohydrates and sugars, but low in calories and low in food volume. Again, what we're trying to think of is not overloading our digestive system. So things like dried raisins or sultanas are really good, and also having things like jelly sweets. Sugary puddings are good, and things like ice cream, even energy drinks can serve you quite well a day before the race, because again, they're very high in carbohydrate, generally quite low in calories, and they're going to serve you quite well, especially when you're looking to try and hydrate yourself as well as you can going into the event. Carbohydrates get a lot of kicking from people nowadays on social media, but trust me, if you don't carb load properly before you go into a big event, I can guarantee you'll start the ride out feeling like your legs are a bit trashy. And I know if you do it properly, you start your ride feeling really energized, and you know that you are ready to give the first part of the ride your best shot. And if you're physically and emotionally feeling really strong and positive, that's just going to give you a better ride overall. Let's talk about my pacing and a few things that threw me off. The normalized power for the whole of the ride was 220 watts. I'm 66 kg, so a quick calculation shows me that I was riding that at about 3.33 watts per kg of body weight. That's actually kind of where I thought I could hold my power for the whole of the ride, but there was a moment in the ride where it all went a little bit south. I did stop quite a few more times than you see in the original video, and that's because when you edit these things, you take a few bits out because you think, well, that's not going to add to the video, and it's just pretty much repeating everything I was saying. But from the edits, you can see, especially in that picture, I'm covered in salt, more so than I would normally be. I know it was pretty hot because I say it quite a few times in the video itself. And I was super aware of that at the time. I kept on looking at my Garmin thinking, crikey, it's 31 degrees. And that's why I was stopping more to get more fluids in. And this is where I experienced something that I've never experienced before. And that was all my energy drinks, electrolytes, energy bars that I'd taken with me, that I never have any problems eating whatsoever or drinking. I just didn't fancy eating any of them at all. So I ended up stopping at petrol stations, buying water, drinking as much of it as I could, filling up my energy bottles with plain water and drinking that, which, if you listen to anything I talk about, saying just drinking plain water is not the cleverest thing to do because you don't retain it in the cells. But here's the thing, and I say this in the video, if you're ever faced with that issue, drink water, because you're better to drink water than nothing at all. And I found myself force feeding myself, knowing that if I didn't do that, I was going to have big problems down the line. Now, that served me well because my legs came back to me, but I still couldn't eat any of my energy stuff. And you'll see that in the video, I was eating a lot of ice creams. And that was because when I stopped at the petrol stations, they had pretty much the same ice creams on offer. And those little sandwich things that I was eating 2 back to back, which had about 37 grams of carbohydrate in each one. And also I knew that every time I was eating the ice creams, it was helping me cool back down, which I think in that heat, I was definitely getting a little bit of heat stroke. So making sure I had plenty of fluids on water alone and eating the ice creams and getting enough carbohydrate in was definitely my thought process. Thinking, I can't eat what I've got on me. No sandwiches, nothing that was on offer looked at all appetizing. I tried to eat a sandwich a couple of times, just couldn't do it. It was just like, this is horrible. And again, so I've never experienced anything like that, but I knew that I had to drink some fluids and get on top of my dehydration status, and I knew I had to eat some carbohydrates, and the only thing that I could actually stomach palatably or even think about digesting was ice cream. To be honest, there are worse things you can eat when you're stuck in a hole like that, so ice cream was definitely a win. The other big takeaway from this is a reminder that when you go and do big events like this, you can have slumps. So your body's going to kick back at you at a time, and you can rescue it as well. So the things to ask yourself when you're having these moments, especially when you feel like you're backing off from the power that you expect to be able to put out, is, am I drinking enough? Am I eating enough? Try and connect with yourself a bit more and go, what's going on? Am I too hot, too cold? That's really important to get across because you can rescue it. It doesn't mean that once you hit that slump, you're done. Because when you look at my power, I had about 220 watts, pretty much right up to sun cells. And then you can notice for about an hour, it dropped to about 188 watts. And then from there onwards, once I'd readdressed my fluid and my overheating situation with ice creams, that I pushed my watts back up to 220. And personally, I think that's a really good insight that I can get across to anybody watching this and all the cyclists and athletes that I coach. Just because you hit a slump doesn't mean you're done. It means you need to really think about what's going on and try and address that situation because you know you can rescue it and push on again. And I won't lie to you, there were moments in that an hour and a half section that I was pretty much force feeding food into myself and making sure that I was putting fluids in, even though I really didn't feel like I wanted to, because I knew that if I didn't do that, my ride was done and I was probably going to have to get a taxi back, which, let's face it, makes for a rubbish YouTube video. And I'm I just didn't want to give up. So I thought, look, you're going to have to do this. You have to keep pushing that in, because if you want to rescue yourself and keep going, you're just going to have to override those feelings and thoughts, just shove it in anyway. Yeah, it wasn't pretty. Here's a little ingenious way that you can potentially ward off coughs and colds. Now, when we travel, we are surrounded by people who might not be the healthiest in the world. So my top tip for people that I coach when they travel is to wash their hands as much as they can when they've been to the toilet or interacted with the public. Make sure you take hand sanitizer with you and try not to touch your face, which is virtually impossible. But here's the thing that I've used recently that I completely forgot about until I spoke to a mate of mine who does this on a regular basis. He swears by it. His wife is one of these super nurses, and she had this recommendation. And that's buying something like a nasal spray. So I use Beckinase, which has got a mild steroid in the back of it, and it kills all the bugs in the back of your throat. So when I get on the plane, I take a few sniffs of this on either side of the nostrils, and it clears everything up. And then when I get off the plane on the other side, I take another few sniffs of this. And generally, I start using this a couple of days beforehand and in the run up to an event. And touch wood, I haven't had a cold yet. So it's just a little intervention that, in my mind, really works. Righty, let's wrap up this video. There are two things that I'm definitely taking away with me from just rethinking about riding around the island as fast as I can. I think I can probably do it quicker. There are a few things in my training that I can change, and there's definitely a few things that, if all being well, if the wind's with me a bit better and my nutrition goes to plan, I don't get overheated, that I think I can ride that faster as a solo cyclist. And then the other thing I think to get across is this. Don't let people tell you you can't take on crazy challenges as you get older. That's their self-limiting belief. And I've had a few people say to me, Simon, you're crazy at 53. Why are you doing these things? Well, I think we should all be doing these things. Yes, it's a little bit random that I downed tools and chucked myself onto a plane and pumped around the island and had a 4-day raid of Mallorca. But I don't think people have got this right. I think people hit a certain age and they just give up because everybody around them is telling them that it's impossible. And this is the reason why I started Velo, because I'm trying to show people with the right training, with the right attitude, with the right nutrition, you can improve your health span and your power, your strength, your enjoyment on the bike for as long as you possibly can do. And I'm showing people that it's possible. And this is the thing about doing these things and filming them and creating the YouTube channel, is that I want to show people that with what I'm doing on a bike, as well as the educational stuff, is that I can help you guys get the most out of your training, the most out of your nutrition, and show you that it is possible to still have a lot of fun and do some brilliant adventures, anything you want, as long as you think that it's still possible. Right, I'm going to leave that there. I've got the Inferno to do, and I'm hoping the weather's going to be good so I can film that. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll be back in a couple of weeks.